Good afternoon. My name is Tamara. Thank you so much for joining us today with Love in a Big World. I'm glad you're here. I am at Graymar Middle School doing a training and professional development for some teachers. So you will see the classroom where I am located for the day in the background. So you'll know that what I'm sharing with you is something that I'm sharing with teachers all over in practice. Thanks again for being here. So here's the format for what we're going to do today. I'm going to share information about how we as caring adults can meet the needs of students who've suffered from adverse childhood experiences. And then we'll have a time for question and answer, and I'll open up the Q&A for you to submit your questions. So thanks again, and let's get started. One of the first things I like to talk about with educators is what is on our students' plates when they come into the school. So if you would take a minute, just think about that. What is on your students' plates? What do they bring with them when they come to you for the school day? And you might say, well, there are all sorts of things. And the things that you've thought about might be included on this list that you see popping up on screen. And I don't know about you, but it looks like their lives are a lot more complicated than mine was when I was their age. And some of the things that they bring with them are developmental, age appropriate. Some of them are external influences, environmental influences that just make life hard. Some of the things that were on that list are actually related to trauma. And in order for us to understand adverse childhood experiences and trauma, we have to define what trauma is. So the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration defines trauma like this. They say trauma is an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, and that has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. If we think about that definition of trauma, who of us has not been touched by trauma? It's the rare individual, because trauma is actually part of our human condition. Now, I know this chart is difficult to read, but I will call forth some things for you. When we look at ACEs, and if you know the history of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, it was a study started by Kaiser Permanente back in 2007. And they began to ask adults about the things that impacted their lives when they were younger. Some of these adverse childhood experiences can include, if you see in that yellow box on the left-hand side, emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional neglect, physical neglect, mother being treated violently, all of these things. It can also be substance abuse, whether that's by the person himself or herself, or that happening in the home and not going untreated, incarceration, bullying. I'll just call forth a few other things: racism, sexism, or any other form of discrimination, natural disasters, and war. So if you look at that list, even those of us here today can say that we are influenced by trauma, whether it's our own experience within our home or in our lives, or even that in the world around us. Now, how does this impact a child's health? Well, this is where, for me, having been in the field since 1996, I'm excited about not that we have these things happening, but I'm excited that the research is connecting the dots and showing the impact of trauma on student learning. So trauma can lower tolerance for stress, which can result in behaviors such as fighting, checking out, or defiance, increase problems with learning and memory that can be permanent, may cause lasting health problems, specifically blood pressure problems, breathing problems, heart problems, increased stress hormones, which affect the body's ability to fight infection, increased difficulty in making friends and maintaining relationships, and reducing the ability to respond, learn, or figure things out, which can result in problems in school. So basically, kids who are operating under trauma are living in a constant state of fight or flight. Again, indicators of a child in need, and this comes from the Child Mind Institute. They have trouble forming relationships with teachers, poor self-regulation, negative thinking, hypervigilance, and executive function challenges. So how do we help them? Well, these are my kids. I have a 13-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 21-year-old. And ours is a story of multiple traumas over a long period of time, everything from cancer to infertility to divorce to adoption to single motherhood, you name it, we've been through it. And when I'm training, I go into more details of our story, our family story. But I share this to say that those of us who are living and working with kids all have a story. I have a story, you have a story. And we have to acknowledge that we bring our story with us into the classroom or into the school building, into our relationships with other teachers, with administrators, and with our students. And not only do we have a story, but our students have a story too. And it behooves us to acknowledge their story and to give place for that story. And instead of labeling kids negatively, ask, I wonder what's going on with him? What's going on with her? And dig deeper to find out what's triggering the problem behavior that they may be having in the classroom or in the school building. What we're really after is a connection, heart to heart, to let kids know that we are a safe place for them, that we are here to help them navigate life. Now, this circle of security is taken from attachment theory and is often applied to parents and children in the home. However, I see application for it in a broader sense for those of us who are in education. So if you'll just follow me around the circle, we as educators, as caring adults in the kids' lives, provide a secure base, a refuge, a safe place for them. And then they go out and they start to explore the world. And what they need is for us to acknowledge them, for us to give attention and to support and encourage them in that. Often when they get out to that farther side of the circle, they encounter some sort of obstacle or resistance. They're triggered in some way. And they get scared. And that's often when they lose control and explode to one degree or another. And when they are in this escalated state, we have to find a way to help bring them back home, to help them calm down and come back to a place of safety. One of the things that I have learned over the years as an educator and as a parent is that it's helpful for me to remind myself that this is not a power struggle. I am the adult, and I am bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind. And as I stay calm, that helps the kids know that I've got them and that I can provide a safe place for them so we can then examine the situation, talk about what happened, and get them back to a place of calm and get them back to a place of safety. So whenever I'm talking with teachers about this, it's like the lights go on in their eyes and they're like, oh yeah. And I can't tell you how helpful it is in the heat of the moment to just say over and over and over again, I am bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind under my breath. And that really helps to ground me so that then I can again be that safe place for the kids. This is some of my favorite research that comes out of the work of Hawkins and Catalano back in 1992 and 95, their work with communities that care. When we're talking about trauma, when we're talking about helping kids get recentered, what we're really looking at is how can we move kids from risk to resiliency. And as we've looked at ACEs, as we've looked at trauma, we've acknowledged today that trauma occurs regardless of socioeconomic background. regardless of ethnicity, regardless of nationality, we have all, as part of our human condition, experienced trauma to one degree or another. Now, how do we develop that ability to bounce back? That's really what resiliency is, the ability to bounce back despite adversity. Well, it takes 3 factors. 1 is relationships, 2, high expectations, and 3, meaningful engagement. So let's talk a little bit further about this. So relationships. Schools, we must acknowledge that the school community is one of the most complex organizations that exist in our society today. We have a multitude of dyads and triads of relationship between administrators and teachers, administrators and students, teachers and students, students and one another, teachers and family members and administrators, family members and the students themselves, and all the complexity of that. There's at the heart of education, at the heart of school, is relationship. And so our job is to create a warm and nurturing environment where everyone feels a sense of belonging. Our goal is for everyone to know that they are seen, that they are known, that they are valued and loved. So when they walk into this school, they feel like they're part of a family. It's their home away from home. And in the increasingly complicated world in which we live, schools need to be that safe place more than ever before. And I'm proud to say that the school that I'm in today is a community achieved school, which means it has a community approach, much like Hawkins and Catalano we're working toward. So here, families can have laundry services. There's a food pantry. There's all sorts of nonprofit organizations providing services. So it's a community approach to providing the support that children and their families need, recognizing the value of relationships. All right, number 2, high expectations. Often, we as caring adults in a kid's life have high expectations, but we don't always take the time to define what those expectations are. And so we might throw out words like respect or responsibility or honesty or kindness, but not really give kids an understandable definition of what those expectations are. So the burden is on us as the adults to make our expectations very clear. And it is my strong belief that those high expectations can only be established well if there's a common language in the school community, defining what it is we desire in the behaviors of our teachers, of ourselves as leaders, and also of our students. And family members too. So with Love in a Big World, we have 24 character traits that clearly define. Choice is the opportunity and power to make decisions. Responsibility, owning what you do and say. Respect, valuing yourself and others. Kindness, treating others the way you want to be treated. And making that language very clear, making instruction on that language very explicit so it can be integrated into the culture and the climate of the school day. Meaningful engagement. So when I do a training, not a webinar training, but an in-person training, there's lots of hands-on activities. There's music, there's movement, there's crazy things that we do with paper plates and giant glasses. I mean, and the reason I do things like that is because I know that the teachers and the people that I'm working with need to have fun, number 1. And number 2, they need to be involved in the learning experience. It's not good enough for me to just sit and click through a PowerPoint. I have to create experiences where they can have meaningful conversations among themselves and have those aha moments. And the same is true for our kids in the classroom. So whether it's, side note, I was out of school last week, and the assistant principal came up to me and said, you know, you really made this training fun. I don't like leading PD. I always get scared because the teachers don't always like it. I said, I know, I understand, but it's how can we create experiences in which everybody feels that they're a part? Now, for kids in the classroom, there's all kinds of ways that we can do that, particularly when we look at interdisciplinary options. When we talk about integrating tech, I mean, one of the things I was talking about with my teachers today was how do kids see the world? And they're naming things like social media and Fortnite and media in general, television, YouTube, all that kind of thing. And so I said, so how can we incorporate those things that inform a child's vision of the world into the classroom to help make, number one, make the connection for them between what's happening in school and what's happening outside of school, but then also to create experiences that are more engaging, so that they can make meaning out of what it is we're teaching. So how can Fortnite or Minecraft be used to teach a social studies lesson? Just questions like that. All right. How can we, as the caring adults in children's lives, provide support for them? These are simple things, and you're probably looking at this like, yes, of course I know these things, but it's so easy for us to slip away from what we know. Having a daily routine, practicing empathy and flexibility, letting kids be part of setting and achieving goals, providing brain breaks, and I'll come back to that in a minute, positive attention, and asking kids, how can I help you? So 2 things I want to highlight. Brain breaks. If you're really honest as an adult, how long can you sit? I know at most of the time it's about 20 or 30 minutes that we go for a stretch. And then we need to check our phone or listen to a song or get up and go to the bathroom or grab something to eat. So why are we placing unrealistic expectations on the length of time that we're expecting our students to sit in their seats? Just something to think about. They need a break too. So whether it's switching up the activity in the same lesson or just letting them stand and stretch for a minute, they need their brain needs a break. Also, asking kids, how can I help you? How valued do they feel when they know that we're asking them what they need? And they may not be able to give the particulars. That's part of our job, to decode what they're saying, but they can give us a sense of what it is that they need. So listening to student voice is incredibly important. So what is character education, social and emotional learning? This is the definition from CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning in Chicago. As we're looking at what we can provide students to help them be successful, SEL, social emotional learning, character education, is an incredible piece of that, helping them to understand and manage their emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. And here are some of the benefits of character education, SEL. And I have that character education / SEL because Maurice Elias, in a recent book that we worked on together last year called Building People, talks about SEL 2.0 and how we've reached a point in time with SEL that it's not just about the skills and competencies, it's actually value laden. And that what we want to do as educators is teach kids how to be better people. And that really is speaking to character. So what we need are explicit skills instruction integrated with academic curriculum and also informed teacher instructional practices, and we'll talk about that in a minute. That leads to the acquisition of these competency areas, improved attitudes, and then the end result and goal is that positive social behavior, fewer conduct problems, less emotional distress, and academic success. Again, why is it important? This comes from Durlach and a meta-analysis he did in 2011. We see that increase in the positive behaviors and a decrease in those risk behaviors. These are CASEL's 5 competencies, and with the work that we do with Live in a Big World, we do align with CASEL. And again, CASEL's at the forefront of what's happening with SEL. And the more that we can have that common language as SEL leaders, the better. And then we have to look not only at SEL and the explicit skills instruction, but our personal goals for the organization, and then consider the content, the what we're learning, and how that impacts culture, and then the how we're learning and how that impacts climate. This is taken from the Center on Great Teachers and Leaders, practices that promote SEL. So there are social teaching practices, and you'll see that some of this aligns with what Hawkins and Catalano mentioned about a warm and supportive environment, making sure that we as teachers, as leaders, are speaking life, watching our language, that we're providing opportunities for responsibility and choice, that our discipline is student-centered, and that it makes sense. That's a whole nother topic for another day. Instructional teaching practices, giving opportunities for cooperative learning, classroom discussions, self-assessment and self-reflection, balanced instruction, academic press and expectation, and competence building. So what do our kids need from us, especially those who've been through trauma? They need an asset-based approach. They need us to name the problem, speak life. We're focused on growth and not perfection. And in these last few minutes before I open it up for questions, I just want to highlight a couple other things, and I'll let you read the rest of the list. But this is the importance of speaking life to our kids, not telling them what they're doing wrong, but calling out the very best in them. And then disciplining for instruction and growth. Punitive discipline is not always beneficial, especially if we don't connect the dots for them, if we don't connect the behavior with the consequence and then give explanation for why it's important for the rest of their lives. And also providing strong school-family connection. Family is the children's first teacher, and our job is to be on the same team with the family members, whether it's parents or grandparents, aunts and uncles, foster families, whoever's raising the child. We're all on the same team, and that's Team Kid. So how can we work together to do the very best for the children in need? So going back to our first slide, what do we serve? Our kids, everything that we do, because of the needs that they have and what they bring with them to school every day. We must serve all that we do on the plate of social and emotional learning. And I'm proud to say that Tennessee, which is my home state, is very on board with this. One last note before the questions from you. This is how Love in a Big World aligns with those CASEL competencies. Just breaking down these character traits into kid-friendly language so that they can be applied into their daily practice. This is my contact info. I'm going to leave that on the screen as I open it up for questions from you. So if you have a question, feel free to add that, because I've opened it up to you now. And I see something in chat. Okay, so as I'm waiting for other questions, I have a question from Roxanne, and she asks, could you elaborate on how you have resources such as laundry and pantry integrated into your school? So that's a wonderful question. In Metro Nashville Public Schools, which is my home district, I live in Nashville, Tennessee, we have an initiative called Community Achieves. And Community Achieves is the one that helps to provide those services. So there are laundry facilities, there's washer and dryer here on site, there's an hours of operation that are available. They also provide the detergent and fabric sheets for the families. Then there's a pantry, so there's designated spaces, there's work with partners, and supplies are donated, and then there's clear hours. Community Achieves office actually also provides a resource person on site. So I think that we're probably close to 15 to 20 different Community Achieve schools within the Metro Nashville Public Schools district. And they actually have Community Achieves coordinators. So in the work, we're doing a pilot now with Love in a Big World and Metro Nashville Public Schools. And we're working with the Community Achieves office as well as Tennessee Safe Schools and the Drug Education office. at the district. So we're coordinating our efforts, and that's a big part of what the community chiefs people do. They coordinate efforts with outside folks. So I hope that helps. Feel free to email me, and I can connect you, Roxanne, for more information on that if you'd like. So another question from Jamie. How do you feel about teachers and administrators who are afraid to tell a child no? I feel like this is a new trend. That's a really good question. Kids need to hear no. I do think that we also need to give them the reason why. So this gets into a lot of different things that I think about a lot, and this is partly how I teach and train, as well as how I raise my kids myself, is always giving the why. I don't think it's enough just to say no for the sake of saying no, but to say no because if this, then that. Does that make sense? But there are things that are very clear. There are clear guidelines. Like if you cross the street when the car is coming, you're going to get hit and you'll get hurt and you could possibly die. I mean, that's a very clear definitive, and kids need to know, like, there are clear boundaries in this world. There's nothing wrong with boundaries. And in fact, one of my favorite quotes is, boundaries define us, they give us shape, and they let us know who we are. And if we live within them, our possibilities are endless. So and I think that's part of what's behind this whole question with the no, is how do we define boundaries for kids? They need to know boundaries. And so it's okay to say, no, don't touch that. That pot on the stove, because you're going to get burned. But we tell them the why. So other questions? Well, I'm so glad. I'll give it a couple more seconds as I'm wrapping up. If you have any other questions, please feel free to chime in. I'm so glad that you chose to join us today. This was our first ever Love in a Big World webinar. We will have other webinars in the future. Next month, we'll be looking at culturally relevant teaching. Okay. See, I knew it would work. That teacher pause, it always works. You talked about how, this is from Corey, you talked about how we as adults can relate to children with ACEs. Can you share an example of how children have used skills, ideas from Love in a Big World when interacting with their peers who have dealt with past trauma? Good question. So particularly related to Love in a Big World, what we're teaching them are the skills, and I'm going to go back, Corey, so you can see this again. And I hope that you can see this clearly on my screen. So we are focused on teaching kids these 24 character traits. And that becomes, like when we talked about Hawkins and Catalano, this is when we look at those high expectations. So our expectations for how we deal with ourselves and with others are these 24 character traits. And then giving kids the opportunity and choice, the opportunity and power to choose, which is the definition of choice, to exhibit these or choose these behaviors in their daily life. So, for example, courage, standing up for what is right. That falls under one of these. So, and it should, I'm noticing a problem. So sorry about that. It's either under self-awareness or self-management. It should be listed. Oh, there it is, responsible decision-making. Thank you. So this comes up a lot in conversations, particularly with boys, when they're about to fight one another. And talking about, okay, and again, often that trigger to fight can come out of that fight or flight because they're in that constant heightened state, right? So they're kind of like porcupines and they're just waiting to throw their quills at somebody. But in those moments, we as the caring adults can intervene, or in a prevention manner, talk to them about, when you're in that situation, you have a choice. You have the opportunity and power to make decisions. Courage is standing up for what is right. Is it the right thing to take matters into your own hands and pop somebody? No? Okay, so what are you going to do instead? And then help them walk through the different alternatives that they have in that situation. Well, I can choose to walk away. I can choose to ask an adult for help. and help them walk it through. So I think part of what you're asking is, how do other kids deal with this? This is a prevention model, so it's universal prevention, and then it's looking at how do we teach all kids these skills and behavior for life, and then when they get into those situations, they have that to draw from their toolbox and help them get out of trouble. I hope that made sense. Let's go. I had another question that came up in chat. Will the PowerPoint be available for our reference? Yes, it will. We will have a recording of this webinar. Thanks for asking, Kim. And then another question from Jamie. What are your opinions on making a child apologize? I work in Tennessee and often struggle with this, manners versus understanding of an emotion. I think that that's a great question, Jamie. Thanks for asking that. Forgiveness is letting go of anger over wrong. So when you're talking about the need for a child to apologize, you have to also consider the person that they've offended. So this gets pretty complex. I am not into forcing a child to apologize if it doesn't come from their heart. One of the questions that I ask, and I encourage other educators and parents to ask, is, how is your heart doing today? And my hope is that we are not just forcing kids to behave for the sake of behaving, but we're moving from extrinsic to intrinsic motivation so that really what they're doing comes out of their heart. And of course that takes time. So there is a point where it can be modeling instead of manners. It might be modeling and saying, well, you know, when you cut this person in line, you need to apologize because that was rude. We don't do that. Instead, we're kind. We treat others the way we want to be treated, and we're courteous. We think of others first and we mind our manners. So modeling that for them is very different than forcing an apology when it doesn't come from their heart. They might need a little time to think. And I know sometimes I do. And if somebody comes to me and says they're sorry, I might say, I'm not ready to forgive you yet. Let's talk about it in an hour. Let's talk about it another day. So I think really it goes back to the intention of the heart. And my hope and goal for us as kids and adults, caring adults, is that that we are authentic, that we're living the real. All right, I think that's our time for today. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, we will be back next month with Love in a Big World and talking about sociocultural relevancy. This webinar will be available for you via recording, and we will send out information on that more tomorrow, so you can look at it again or share it with others. Please, again, feel free to get in touch. And Tamara at Love in a Big World. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.